Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Preparing for the Future, Navigating Challenges and Adopting Digital Technology in the Greenhouse. I'm today's moderator, Chris Manning. I'm an editor at Greenhouse Management Magazine. With the landscape of agriculture changing constantly, growers are facing increasing pressure to adopt digital technology to ensure the success of their business. We have a panel of experts today that are going to provide insights into best practices for adopting digital technology. I am going to introduce them now. First, we have Todd Waterman. He is a industry pre-sales solution at Velosio. Todd has a focus on horticulture there. In his role, he is responsible for talking to prospective clients and gathering requirements to create meaningful, relevant software demonstrations that meet their business needs now and into the future. He spent 18 years working in operations as a propagator in San Diego. He has now spent the last 6 years with the company. Next, we have Sarah Silver. She's the director of horticulture solutions at Velosio. In her role, she's responsible for the overall direction and successful delivery of projects related to the horticulture practice. She consults with marketing, sales, and product management teams to drive sales efforts and further the development of relationships with prospects and clients. She brings over 8 years of experience in the horticulture space and over 30 years of ERP experience. Lastly, we have Matthias Reyna. He is the CEO of Freedom Tree Farms. He initially began his career in investing in finance. After finishing his MBA at Yale, he decided to switch career paths and targeted the small business space. He soon found Chenmark, a family-owned holding company dedicated to buying and running small businesses for the indefinite future. He's been managing Freedom Tree Farms, one of Chenmark's operating companies, for the past year as CEO. His first year was focused on implementing a new ERP through his partnership with Velosio, standardizing reporting on inventory and production, and maintaining Freedom Tree's culture throughout the ownership transition to help the company's success. All right, we're going to get this started, get into the meat of today's thing. I'm going to turn it over to Matthias.
Sure. So thanks for the introduction. I think the first thing we really wanted to talk about today was succession planning. So one of the things, to give a little bit of background on Chenmark again is a family-owned business up in Maine that looks at small businesses and invests in them for the indefinite future. So we don't really have any sort of, we're not like a typical PE company. We don't have these sort of 5-year cycles. We really buy companies that we think are successful, and we hope to keep them going for the indefinite future. So when you think about that, when you think about our strategy, we deal with a lot of folks who are looking, a lot of people who own businesses for a while who are looking to retire and are thinking about the next stage of their business. So today I kind of want to talk about a little bit about my experience with that. And I think one of the important things to talk about is, what it is that we look for when we're trying to buy a business. One of the things I think the three most important things are, is it really a business or is it really a practice? And what does that mean? Is there sort of procedures in place? Is there, can the company survive past the ownership? So that's the first thing. Is it really a business or is it just a practice that's relationship driven? The second thing we sort of look for is just understanding the accounting. Does the accounting make sense? Can we really put a value out there or like an offer out there from the company that we feel is justified by, the accounting processes or that that the company has. And the last thing is, like, I think it's really personal on the owner's front. What is the owner looking for? Are they trying to stay involved? Are they trying to sort of go on vacation immediately after they sell their business and go on? And I think that's always the reason why we look for that is really to see if the owner themselves has really thought about that transition and what they want it to look like. More than anything, to see if we're a good fit. I think selling a company isn't just about who's willing to buy, but is it a right fit for what I want after I give the keys to someone else? So I think that's really the thing that we sort of look for on that when looking to buy a company. So what would I recommend? I think the three things I would recommend for anybody looking to potentially sell their business is to start early. Some of the things we just talked about, getting your accounting straight, figuring out what you really want from a buyer, and finding a good partner can take time. I think most companies usually manage to sell themselves between 5 and 10 years, and that requires just thinking about it ahead of time. If you're like potentially thinking about retirement, maybe I think it's important to think about that with this idea that if I need to sell my business, it's going to take a while. So what do I need to do to prepare for that? And what do I really want? I think that's the other question that I would really kind of impose on the seller, is to just think about it. What do I want? Do I want to stay involved? Do I want to not be involved anymore? Do I want to really just hand it off to someone else? And those are just questions that I would sort of really think through a lot when you're looking to sell your business.
Yeah, I think there's been in the last few years just a huge shift in the next generation coming in, and this is such a family-owned business, industry. So we've talked to a lot of prospects. We've talked to some prospects like companies like Matthias. It's always interesting if they don't have any experience in the industry, they react like, wow, the accounting's kind of crazy. So, but I think that it really comes down to the tribal knowledge. So we have such, employees that stick with us for so long, that are so loyal. There's usually these 30-year employees that have all the tribal knowledge. We didn't ask the computer, we asked Sandra, knew where everything was at, knew what we had. I think every company has like a Sandra that really is the kind of the brain trust. And that's really a big vulnerability, really, because all of what's in her head, is not in the computer. Everybody asks for that hit by a bus, what if so-and-so gets hit by a bus, and we've actually been contacted by a prospect one time that his head grower had a heart attack, unfortunately, and that was that employee, and I mean, this owner was distraught, being like, I just lost, I know nothing, and everything was in his head. He didn't have any documentation. So I think that's really something to be said for digital technology and really getting a system that can really house all that information. And I think it's important with this latest generation too, because whether the kids go to college or not, they have been using technology since birth, in this generation. So I think it's really important to attract employees, to get new employees, and to attract a company like Matthias. If you choose to sell your company, I think that usually that's the first thing. Something like, and I think Matthias, you guys did that. I think you're going to get into that later, but I think it's really important.
It takes time. To get to Velosio, I sold a company, so I wasn't a grower. I was in a technology business, and I recognize the effort it took to get all of our books in order. When it was my husband and I running this business, we could kind of handle things in our head and really, and here we sold technology software, and we still weren't, we were the shoemaker's children, as they say. And it's a big effort to get your best practices in line so that the business can run. And it's kind of like you remodel your house so you can sell your house, you get it all nice. And then it's like, oh, maybe I don't want to sell my house. And it was kind of the same. Once we started preparing to sell our business, suddenly it was running really well with less input from us, which was awesome. And then we were able to present the value much better.
And I think just like another thing that makes why it's so great to look at it as a company that's well organized is, you can imagine the growth potential, really just as a buyer, you just see it a lot more if there isn't this sort of, if everything is sort of organized in a system, or, if, like you said, it gets easier. It gets easier to run a business once it's better organized, or or you allow technology to kind of use technology in the right way, and it just gives you this sort of growth opportunity. And I think some owners may not have that sort of potential to do that, and that's when you're ready to sell and you find the right partner, you can kind of be like, I've done everything I could. There's nothing wrong with giving the keys to someone else and be like, hey, I've got this in a place that I'm proud of, but I'm I'm 70, I'm ready to retire, and like I want to go to Aruba for the rest of my life. I think if you get there, you earn that right, and finding the right partner is pretty important to allow them to kind of continue the business and continue to support all your employees, all your customers that you built relationships for the last few years. But yeah, so kind of going back to the next sort of topic that we wanted to discuss on this webinar. One of the things that I sort of experienced when we took over the business was just I really wanted to manage inventory differently. So we're going to talk about inventory management, and I'll just describe sort of my own my own experience with it, why I wanted to do it, and how it's sort of been. So I think inventory management, especially in this space, can be pretty complicated. So we're a fruit tree grower for the most part. So our growth cycles are between 2 and 3 years, and we grow from seedling to the pot. So we're pretty like vertically integrated in that sense. So I really wanted to understand just like, how do I like track the costs of something that's in the ground for 3 years at a time? And there were 2 aspects of inventory management that we were handling at the time. Is one is like, what do we have first? Like, what do we have in the field at any given time? What do we have in the potting yard at any given time? And how does the cost change over time? Like, that was pretty much like the biggest question we had. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Like, if you know your inventory, you can plan ahead and sell it appropriately. You can plan your production ahead, so I can start thinking about selling items 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road now as I'm planting, and finding customers that could potentially fill those gaps. So it just, as a grower, I think it just makes things a lot easier if you can handle your inventory from start to finish. And what's interesting about our business is that you can sell it at different points in time. So I can sell a tree as a bare root product or as a container product. Like, does it make sense for me to do that? Does it make sense for me to sell this product early if it's dying, if it's a lot of it's dying off? And I think we think about that a lot as managers of companies, but we don't necessarily know exactly the math or the margin improvement that we get from continuing to hold it for a long time. Like, if you have a lot of die off, at some point you're like, maybe the math doesn't make sense, and is there a way for me to really understand that? So those questions were things that I've sort of experienced in the last year, and I really thought the only way to do that was, even at the start, was through like partnering with a company like Velosio that would help me sort of integrate this process I had in my head into a system that I could use going forward. And it's really a commitment. I think we talk about I've talked about partnerships a lot and thinking about who you want to work with, and I think like that was a big part of our decisions. Like, who do we want to work with? Who do we want to use in this journey to find what our costs are? It's going to take us 3 years. It's really going to take us 3 years to really get good information and good data. And we need a partner who's going to be around for the next 3 years. So, a lot of the ERPs we saw out there were kind of old technology, not necessarily supported by like a giant, like a good company like Microsoft that's going to continue iterating. And Velosio is also like adding more and more different types of software, different types of attributes that'll just continue to improve. So I thought that was probably one of the biggest reasons I decided to do that. And second, it just you have a team of people that's helping you along the way. So should I do that myself? Should I try to build it myself or hire someone to do that? That was like the big decision there, outside of like just, is the technology going to last? Was, can I do this myself? Should I hire like 20 people to do this? No, it made absolutely no sense. It just, like, economically, it made a lot more sense to just hire Velosio that would be like upkeeping all this. So a bit of a mouthful there, but I'll pause and kind of hear what Todd has to think about.
Yeah, I think the majority of the prospects we come into have 2 systems. The productions and spreadsheets usually, and this is small companies, large companies, all across the board. Usually it's separate. So the inventory is in the production spreadsheet, all the sales orders are in, let's say, QuickBooks or something like that. So there is really no one version of the truth, right? And I think something like our product Silverleaf, really, which runs on Dynamics Business Central, really gives them the opportunity to build all that into the system, get it into the same system where it's deducting from the inventory as the sales are coming in. And also that leads towards you really being able to make, really educated decisions and not really kind of, checking the wind and really get you to start making profitable decisions. And once you get to where you're growing inside the system, then you can utilize all of the tools in the system for our next topic, costing.
I'll talk a little bit about what Business Central is and kind of how we came up with the design of our solution. We see a lot of software that, I'll do air quotes, that's ERP software because it's been written for a specific industry. And typically those software solutions handle the industry really well, but they don't handle the core business is deeply. For example, financials, inventory control, security, fixed assets, the supply chain side, purchasing, workflows. So we chose to build our solution, Silverleaf, on top of Microsoft Dynamics Business Central, which is a world-class ERP that has hundreds of thousands of installations around the world. And our solution sits inside of it and extends it for the horticulture space so that we get the best of both worlds, which I think is a strong play as these companies are growing. We scale with your company as you grow. We're in the cloud, and we get all the whipped cream and cherry on top of having Outlook integration, all the Microsoft Stack things as well. So that's how we decided to build our solution on Microsoft, because it gave us a big head start on the core functionality, and then we could focus just on the industry expertise.
That's such a great point. I think, sorry, somebody just walked into my office, threw me out there. We're live. I think some of the more industry specific softwares that are out there, I think the industry's been starving, I think, for something like Business Central. There's good products out there, but they needed production tools and that. So they do have good production tools, but they're actually trying to write their own ERP, trying to write an accounting system and things like that. So we're totally flipped that, right? We're starting with a finished mothership that we're just adding to fill gaps. And I think that's something that really sets us apart. And the fact Microsoft is not going anywhere, right? In 100 years, we're not going to be here, but Microsoft still will be.
Yeah. Back when I was a kid, they used to say no one ever got fired for buying IBM. And now I feel like the Microsoft platform gives us the same security that, back in the day, maybe IBM gave, but, it's, I think, we've seen a lot in the past year with ransomware viruses and other hacks, phishing, all that stuff. And we know that, Microsoft's got, to say the least, the A-team on that. So we don't have to worry about infrastructure or security. It gives us a big head start so we can sleep at night.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also
You're
think
back.
from my perspective, I'm new to the industry, right? I've been here for about, I've been in the green space for maybe 2 years now. And I can tell you, I've just seen so many people try in different industries to basically square peg to a round hole, right? Should I make something fit, or should I build it myself and just waste hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars trying to get something to work and build it internally, when you can most likely get a system that's out there that knows how to you can get a system to work the way you want, or get a lot of the information you want without needing to build all this infrastructure internally. I know if I were to try to build what Microsoft, what Business Central does on my own, to just get it to fit better to what I think it should look like I would take way too long to try to get that to work. It would take me forever. Software developers, I'd have to pay them way too much money to get it. To me, it doesn't really make too much sense. I'd rather, we didn't have any sort of specializations or, anything specific that we had the Velosio developers make for us. We just use it out of the box. We're like, all right, we can figure out a way to get the information we need with this if we have someone to kind of guide us through how the system works. And that was kind of the approach I took. I just didn't really want, frankly, to spend the money to try to build it myself and have it not work. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me.
And it also didn't make sense to continue to use, your company probably was using spreadsheets and a lot of, we say, and we use this in some of our blogs, you'll hear it. We talk about the daily acts of heroism that are required when you're not running an integrated system. It's update this spreadsheet, do this, do that, go put it in QuickBooks or whatever the accounting solution is. And someone forgets to do one thing, and then your month-end closing process takes weeks because you have to reconcile everything. So that's where we feel having a solution built into Business Central really provides a lot of value to the people, of course, in operations who are worried about inventory and sales and forecasting and all that. But the information's just fed to the finance people, and they don't have to, there's not all this manual handoff that goes on vacation to Aruba.
Yeah, exactly. And you're where it is. You don't have to dig through spreadsheets to find where everything is. It's just it's all in one system. We have a process in place where we update things monthly, quarterly, however, whatever makes sense. I know inventory counts. Do you want to do that? We produce over 600,000 trees. Are we going to count 600,000 trees every month? No, but we're going to figure out how to get the right information we need and put a process around it so that it's all stored in the same place. I just think I've had so many things where this spreadsheet looks different than it did yesterday. We're like, what happened? And you're just no, that's not how you. I need to have a source of truth, have an audit trail. Let me see why something changed. Maybe does it make sense? And I think that's all stuff that within Business Central and a centralized system you just get more clarity on, and you don't have this I thought that was 1,000, not 100. It just reduces a lot of the risk and whatnot that you could get from people changing things around.
Yeah.
But
let's talk about costing and I think a lot of the question we hear a lot is, I have no idea what it costs for me, what this plant cost me to grow. So a lot of organizations we meet know they're doing well based on their bank account and they don't really know margins and things like that. And so maybe, do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Sure. So again, this has been this has been such a huge part of why I wanted to use the system. I think it's, we didn't have a great sense, especially coming from not really having a lot of experience in the horticultural space. You'd ask a question how much does it cost to produce this particular SKU or this particular item? And people aren't necessarily sure. They look at their bank account, they know what's going up, but how is that the most efficient way to grow? How can I not get labor to something that's just gonna, that doesn't make sense to actually sell to begin with? Am I pricing it right? Am I, really tracking these costs so I know I'm making money on each individual SKU? What we tend to find, especially at Genmark, and what I've sort of seen is you can kind of tell that if something isn't gonna make a lot of money, but you have no way of proving it. So using a sort of this accrual system where you're tracking costs from beginning to end will help you sort of answer that. And the big thing that we see when we buy companies, the first thing we want to look for is what is the worst performing SKU? That is just, there's always something where you're not making the money that you think you are. And getting rid of that just makes a huge difference in terms of what your growth and how your margins are going to look and how much money you get in the bank over the next couple of years. So, I mean, for us, it's just so important to understand how much the cost side of everything. It just dictates, am I pricing these things right? Should I up the price here or there? Is the market not going to accept a price that much? So should I just remove this from my production to begin with? I think that's something that we've definitely been using Business Central to sort of focus on.
Yeah. It takes discipline. You have to track. It takes discipline. You have to, track the things you use in your growing process and make sure that that's accounted for and someone just doesn't go grab a bunch of something and use it, that it gets logged so that it can be included in the cost.
Yeah, and it like allows you to test things, right? Like if you know that you're using like a certain, fertilizer in a block, and is it working or not? Have you decided, did you switch fertilizers? Does it make sense? It's cheaper and it's a new product out there. Like it gives you this opportunity to be like, well, in this block, I'm going to use this one, and this one, I'm going to use that one. Let's see what the difference in yield looks like. And maybe that makes sense. Maybe these different practices that I'm going to try to do as like the market develops and as like things change, like should I do it or not? Is this new variety of red bud? We do a lot of red buds, for example. Should I produce this, or am I getting like 10% yield whenever I go to bud it? Like those are questions that as if you're tracking this through a system and tracking the cost along the way, you can kind of see, well, 20% of these died immediately. Like that's an additional cost that you need to sort of keep in mind when you're ultimately selling the product a few years down the road. And like you said, discipline's the only way to do that. Like having a system in place and discipline where you say, like, I need to every day I need to start adding these costs or tracking these costs. And I think the thing we as an owner or as a manager, I've thought a lot about how is this going to affect the culture of our company? How is this going to affect people? Like, is it going to change their job? Is it going to change the way they do things? And I've sort of tried to veer away from whatever I'm doing in the office isn't affecting the operations out there. And if I am ready to tell them look, we need to start producing these, stop producing something because I've tracked these costs for the last year, we're losing money off it doesn't make sense. It's harder for, it's much, you can give a much more justified reasons to change the operations when you have data and support that will show you that this doesn't make sense to do anymore.
Yeah, I had two bosses for 18 years. So I had one boss that was the businessman, that was the accountant, right? Ran that side of the business. And then my other boss was the plant geek. So it's so ironic when you just mentioned that about being able to prove, whether something makes money or not, and the accountant boss of mine would always say, we're not trying to create a museum, right? But there would be a couple customers or something that really like this oddball product or something. So then they would want to do it. But that was the constant fight, is really neither of them really being able to convince the other, and I think that was because we didn't know our costs. Our financials didn't have a cost of goods sold on it. I took an accounting class and brought in our financial, and that was the first thing the teacher said is, where's the cost of goods sold? I'm like, that's a good question. But we actually didn't know it, at that time. And, we were a very successful company. But it's just an example of really, I think you hit the nail on the head, Matthias, just saying that, you need to be able to prove that, not just to the owners. Obviously, the growers are going to do whatever you want, but being able to have everybody understand. The closest we got right before my departure, we really used one group, and we realized one of our best-selling items we were losing 2 cents on every one we sold. And we're like, wow, that's a real popular item. That's a lot of pennies.
Yeah, and when you do hundreds of tens of thousands of them, it turns into real dollars real quick. Yeah. So I think that's I'm not there. Realistically, I'm not there yet, right? I don't know if I'm making or losing money on certain products. Not yet. I know, again, bank accounts going up, looks good, happy, but over the time I need to, we have to be a little bit. We're trying to get smarter. We're trying to get.
Yeah. Are you leaving money on the table? Do you really know?
Yeah. Yeah.
What should be growing more of? What should be growing less of?
Yeah, and it is everything's a market, right? If I can try to price it up, but if no one's going to buy it at that price, it probably doesn't make sense for me to produce it. Let someone else who can do it. If they're selling it at a low price and can make money off of it, go ahead. I'm fine with that. But I can't be in a position where you're putting all this time and effort into something that you're not making money off of when you could just produce something else that you're making money on, and then. Again, we're all in this, it's all a business. So we're all trying to improve in different ways if we can. I think this sort of system is, for me, at least conceptually, it's the only way I can really see us managing this company and growing it going forward.
Well, and you're growing something that takes years. Todd, your experience was more like annuals,
4
right?
weeks.
So the quick turnaround. Do you think, did you have different issues than Matthias with costing and?
No, I think Matthias's cost is probably a little bit harder because of that, it's accumulating costs for all those 3 years, but really comes down to the same thing though, really. I often wished we made widgets or something that you knew how much it costs and throw it in a
Every
bin and it
time.
can stay there forever, but because it's
And they don't
perishable,
die in 4 weeks.
yeah, they don't get virus, they don't get,
They don't need water,
all
care and
these
feeding.
things. So yeah, it is there's a reason that most companies don't know, because it's a very difficult calculation with everything, with electricity and space and water and all that. So it's not that you get a new system and all of a sudden, boom, I know my cost, right?
Yeah.
It still takes diligence, it still takes a lot of work, but you do really have to start with a system really that can handle it.
Yeah, and I think like on that, like we're trying something, right? Like I think we have a system in place. We have like we're organizing things with blocks and in the field and everything by like variety and size in the yard, and like we think that we have something in place, but we'll see. We're trying it. We're gonna, but operations and like theory never go hand in hand. So like I'm sure we're gonna have to iterate it. We're gonna continue to learn more along the way, and like, but in the end, in the long term, when I think about the company, I'm not thinking, again, since we're not trying to turn this company around, the company's doing fine. Like there's nothing wrong with it. It's doing great. We just really want to put it in a place where we can grow intelligently, and like if we don't grow, that's fine. Like we just want to be smarter about how we're doing things so that we can sort of prove it out and be sure that if we are going to invest money somewhere, we have like more conviction about what we're doing. And that's really like the goal in all this. And I imagine it's going to be a 3 to 5 year like point where we really have really, really good information that we can be like, I am confident about this. And then because it's horticulture, a hurricane will come in, destroy half the product, and we'll have to start.
Yeah, right.
Like there we
go.
There's things we can control and things you can't. And I'm just trying to control what I can, which is just, how do I invoice stuff? Where do I put it? How do I take costs in, and how do I track it so that I have a good sense of what my costs are going to be?
I was reading a blog, I think it was just yesterday, days run together sometimes, about all the growth expected in the horticulture space in the next 10 years. And as Todd was saying, they were losing 2 cents a plant. The real question is, as you grow, as your company scales, are you ready to scale? Do you have efficient operations to scale? Or man, if you didn't know your costs, and they always joke, we'll make it up in volume. Well, imagine if your business, Todd, doubled, and you're losing now, 2 cents on twice.
I'm losing double the money.
Yeah, it's really, you got to be ready to scale and ready to grow, and fail fast if you have the information, pull that product, or and so you can pivot as needed. And as this industry is going to grow, it's going to, no pun intended, it's going to require improvements and efficiencies, or people are going to get, oh, here's another pun, weeded out, but have to keep up. And I think, we talk, of course, this is our Todd and my experience. And obviously, Matthias, you've got a technical background that, technology is only going to help you improve those efficiencies.
Yeah.
To prepare for. So Matthias, when I'm going off road here and asking you a question, because I'm mostly interested with your long planting cycle, the couple of years for the trees to grow.
Yeah.
How do you get forecasts from customers, or are you basing your planting decisions, excluding the margin on plants that we talked about before, but how do you make those decisions of what to plant?
So, I mean, for our first year, I really just kind of focused on maintaining. I didn't, again, I don't know where to grow and don't want to have this issue where I grow a lot in a section that, is actually losing money and it hurts me down the road. I really just focused on keeping it sort of steady. I didn't plant any more this year. We kept everything relatively the same, just so we get a good sense of what it was going to be. Now, in terms of the customers, that's a whole different thing. You can, for us to grow into a program, we don't necessarily get commitments from people 3 years down the road. Like, you're not going to get a big box retailer to commit to buying something when you're 3 years down the road. It's just not going to happen. So we kind of, we just sort of like feel it a little bit. And, fortunately in our space, we're seeing less and less growers. So we're kind of taking advantage of that and being the sort of one-stop shop for everything. And we have efficiencies that other growers can't really like compete against. So we can offer a pretty attractive price for some of these products. But you do get a sense, you ask people what they're thinking about, and you give them a sort of timeline for it, and you start building into it. Like, can I get stuck one year with like producing a lot and have a customer drop off? I think every grower is afraid of that. But we try to, you try to partner with the right people, and you try to not get overcommitted with a certain customer. Like if a customer that is already doing this isn't, we don't have any customer that represents like half our business, but if that was ever the case, like I'd be very careful to continue growing with them, because if one year they just say like, well, I'm not doing this anymore, you're kind of stuck. So and that's like a system that also helps you with that, right? You see like, what is my sales? What's percentage of that sales? Like percentage of my margin that's related to this one customer? Like if I were to lose them, what's the risk of that? And how would I mitigate that? I mean, what I could do is I can sell it at different points. So I can sell it as berry product to another grower. So that's like something I would try to do. But yeah, it's hard to plan that far in advance. And like, it's like a big risk for us. And then you add the risk of not knowing whether or not like what your cost is. It's like kind of hard to, really have that conviction to want to grow very quickly, very fast. So, I mean, I've been fairly conservative about it, really, but I think like I'm building the infrastructure to make those sort of bets and be smarter about it.
How did you, in your previous life, before you were a pre-sales solution engineer, did you on the annuals and side, did you get better forecasting information?
Oh yeah,
from customers?
yeah. We were liners too, so they were the young plant input. So we'd get orders a year in advance, and the order would probably change 50 times.
Yeah.
On it. So that was a big deal to track that too, and it was tough.
Yeah. It's hard to deal with. Then you kind of get like, for us on the other side of it, we have die off. Like then we have to change the order on someone. So like all that stuff is, I think people get frustrated when you say like, I don't have this product anymore. Like we had, freeze came through and killed a couple hundred trees. I'm sorry, I can't give this to you. Like I think those kinds of things with like a system, you can get a better sense of like, how likely is this going to happen. And when you do, you can tell your customers.
Yeah, the customers are very understanding if you tell them beforehand,
As long as you manage expectations.
If you're proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah.
Well, Todd and I and some others on our team have spent countless hours talking about availability calculations. And, it's not like the widget Todd was talking about before that you can just run another shift in your factory and make more if you have more demand. We can't do that in horticulture. So we have to really manage availability, make sure one salesperson isn't stealing from the availability for his customer versus another customer with a commitment and things like that. So we've lost a lot of sleep on the availability features in our solution to make sure it's really on point.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, you can't run a business without it, right? And
yeah,
it's like managing customers' expectations of like, can you add more? It's like maybe, like it's
I don't know.
Yeah, like I don't know. Like you gotta,
They love hearing that.
yeah.
Well, I mean, if you hold like they ask for like a reserved product for like a year, and then 3 weeks before, a week before, they're like, well, do you have more?
No, this takes 3 years to grow, right?
Yeah.
Money.
Let me go put it in the microwave and speed that up.
Yeah, right.
These things take time. So I think we try to find customers that are understanding, but like to say that we haven't had large canceled orders before, it's like it happens, and you try to find people that'll tell you as soon as possible so you can find another one for your product.
Awesome. Well, Chris, I think we're probably getting ready for questions, do you think? Or is there anything else we wanted to talk about before?
Yeah, we could talk forever, right?
Yeah, I know. My coffee got cold though.
Yeah, right.
I mean, look, cold coffee is not good for anybody unless you're into cold coffee, and then you just get the caffeine rush. But yeah, we can transition into questions now. And I want to kind of start with, I think, what feels like a natural follow-up, which is and maybe Matthias, you could kind of dive into this from your perspective as a business owner, but how long does it take to set up the software? Like if you're going to go this route, like is the setup process, is the integration process, is that a long lead time for growers?
I think it took us about 6 months to get like the system really going. So that was like the commitment that I sort of made. I planned to do it as soon as our shipping season was done. So once we get more like operationally intensive, it gets a little like you just opens up time. So we started it in May as soon as we were done with shipping and finished it in November. So it was pretty tight in terms of like we expected it to be 6 months. It was 6 months. Like I think when we were talking to the Melissa, who was our sales rep, and James, who was like our implementation expert, like they gave us that timeline and kind of for the most part stuck to it. I think like getting it to work is one thing. Getting it to work how you want it is gonna, that's just an iterative process that takes a couple of years. But I think for now, like we're happy with it. It's working how we want, and we're like allocating labor, allocating materials, and getting a sense of what our costs are. So I think 6 months is a good sense.
And that's what we usually say. People often are looking for something quicker, and the challenge is you've got a day job, right? And then take a business that's so seasonal. We know there's blackout times when we're not going to get much interaction from the growers, and so we usually say 4 to 6 months, and then it's a continuous improvement thing. You might come to us and say, hey, now I'm ready to try this, and we can continually be making it better. Maybe you want to get into business intelligence reporting and automation and things like that. It can continue to improve as once you get settled in, you can bring on more.
And everybody wants the reports. That's the cherry on top and all that, the data. But you got to be able to get this, however many employees you have, to get in this new system and be able to at least take orders, ship it, and just get to where you can do your business takes a while. So, like Matthias said, it is going to take a couple of years to where you're really reaping the rewards. It's not something that's easy, but it's definitely worth it in the end.
I should know that if anyone does have questions that is viewing this right now, you can submit them, and we'll answer a couple of those as well. If anyone would like to submit questions, our excellent panel can do that. So as far as this technology, and maybe this is a better question for Sarah, Todd, have you guys seen this technology and these planning tools helped or used to help growers plan for disasters or the unknown, as that can come up as things happen out of your control?
I would say that the biggest example I can think of is COVID. And just there was so many on-premise servers, where we're all in the cloud, we're in the Microsoft cloud, it's redundant, it's their responsibility, to have that redundant. So all of the employees that were then going to try to work at home, I mean, we used to never have any grower customer really ask much about whether the product was in the cloud. But now that's one of the first questions they ask, just from that experience of trying to get people to work from home and trying to get the remote access and all that, I think has changed a lot. What about you, Sarah?
That, I mean, we know people can't water plants remotely, but
Yeah, right.
the office staff can work from home, and we again, going back to my experience as a former business owner, being in the cloud meant we could all just take our laptop and be at home, and cloud is really useful for that in all industries, I think. And I also I mentioned before about ransomware viruses.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Those just are the sort of things we should all be losing sleep over, worrying about, because if you don't have a good security structure set up, and in the Microsoft cloud, that's not going to happen. There's multi-factor authentication and things like that to really secure your environment. So and backups, all that stuff that 10 years ago, you know, you had an IT team that was doing that. So I kind of strayed a little bit from your question, Chris. I don't think we can predict the weather
Yeah, right.
emergencies.
Yeah.
But,
I think
yeah,
so. I do
yeah.
think I did find some value in it, in that, like, you know, you can always, my background's mostly in finance. So like one of the things we always say in finance is when you have a high loss, low probability situation, you buy insurance for it. And like what the system does when tracking inventory does is allows you to understand how much insurance you really need to, like, if I lose all my product in a year, which is sort of the question I asked myself, like, how much insurance should I buy? And my insurance bill went up a ton, but like I am not afraid of like the company going forward now, because like I know what my inventory is, and I know like what I need to, how much insurance I need to buy to ensure that if I like lose all my product in a year, I have enough money to kind of fund myself for the next 2 years. So it's still helpful from that regard.
And if that hurricane takes out your server room,
Yeah,
with your server with all the data, and no one bothered taking the backup tapes home.
What about all the drawers with all the paperwork that has
right.
the sales orders and the faxes that come in? Like,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
that's another thing where you like, I don't worry about that anymore, because we have like the Google Drive, we scan everything, and it's in our system.
Yeah. Only we want you to use Microsoft SharePoint, but same thing.
I meant SharePoint.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
we always say, well, what I always say is, if I spilled a cup of coffee on my computer, I keep talking about coffee today too.
I think you just need more coffee, I think is what we're
Well,
learning here.
We all do.
I'm usually in
Yeah.
Phoenix, and this morning I woke up in Atlanta, so the time change is a little brutal. But if I spilled a cup of coffee on my computer, what's it going to take? Or if any of my employees, you know, if their computer got stolen, you know, their laptop got stolen out of their backpack, and with the cloud, it doesn't matter. You can be up and running in no time. Your system admin can lock all your accounts, so no one, you know, can wipe out that device and no one can get at it. But the cloud provides so much more. It's just, I was slow to adopt the cloud because it meant a big investment and time and effort and change, you know, about 10 years ago. And I think it's been life-changing. So I'm all cloud.
So let me ask this to the panel as a follow-up. The green industry, whether it's greenhouses or nurseries or whatever, sometimes they take a little bit more time to adopt technology and really adopt sort of some of the practices that are modern that other businesses maybe have adopted, you know, 5 years ago or something like that. With how things are done now, is there really any reason not to, whether it is this, whether it is something else, whether it is just more digital accounting practices, is there any reason not to take some of the practices that maybe they've done with pen and paper and stored in desk drawers and whatever, and not digitize it and not modernize it in that way? Is there any reason not to do that at this point?
I can't think of one.
Well, some owners, what were we talking about a couple of weeks ago? They might keep 2 sets of books, but I can't support that.
Yeah.
No.
No, I can't think of a good reason. The only thing that comes to mind is that like some of our team uses like cardboard, because if it rains, it doesn't get blurry. I don't think I'll ever convince them to use something else, but maybe I'll get like a waterproof casing on an iPad, so they don't have to like worry about their stuff getting smudged out in the field.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a compromise that they make it in the iPad, just maybe
Yeah,
a little easier to carry too.
Give me the cardboard and I'll give you an iPad. How does that trade sound?
That's a pretty good
Yes.
trade, I think.
Sounds like a fair trade to me.
Yeah.
So let's transition to succession planning.
Sure.
For any of you guys, how if someone is going to do that successfully and is going to succession plan, you know, in a way that's going to allow it to work, how early should growers start to make these decisions and assess sort of their situation?
Oh,
I can
you
kind of
get the idea of his question.
You got the gist of it, right?
I think I talked about it a little bit before. I really think like just time is the most important. Like I think if you think 5 years, 5 years is probably a good thing to start thinking about it before you want to, before you really think that you're going to sell your company. I just think again, like some of this stuff, like getting your books in line, finding the right. I think the big thing is just finding the right partner. Like you've built this company for years, and like you deserve to leave it how you want it to. And the best way to do that is to like take your time with it. It's not going to be like a everyday thing. It's going to be little wins here and there, and eventually you'll get what you want. But it does take time, and I would just recommend at least thinking ahead 5 to 10 years.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking at the chat since I'll play the role of Chris for a minute since it looks like he cut out. One of the questions that came in from the chat is about what integrations the software has and with other systems and how that all works. Todd, as a pre-sales solution engineer or whatever your title, maybe you can speak a little bit.
Sounds important, doesn't it?
Sounds so good. So
I do demos. That's what it is, right?
Maybe you can talk
Yeah,
about
I think that's one of the biggest selling points. That's a really good question for me, is it's all integrated with Microsoft Office. So who doesn't use Microsoft Office? I think Sarah mentioned earlier, it's integrated with Outlook. So you can look at orders, enter orders, edit orders, do any of that from Outlook if you're a traveling salesperson. It's all integrated with Excel. So, any of the lists and pages and, like take your items. You need to mass update items. Well, you just click edit in Excel. It pulls all the information in Excel. You make your edits, press publish. You can actually paste from Excel into the browser, into ledgers and sales orders and all these different things. So I think everybody's looking for software for the accounting, for their growing operation and that. And then they really are the most excited about all kind of the standard ERP stuff, that really they've lived without for so long.
Hello, sorry about that. I
problem.
vanished into the ether for some reason. So where are we at? What did I miss?
We
just took a question.
Chat. Okay. Yeah, we grabbed a question from the chat about integrations.
Beautiful.
And looks like someone was asking Matthias more about do buyers oh, I think I know the answer to this, or I know what I hope the answer is. Do you see buyers wanting growers to have some sort of technology in place? So if they're getting ready to sell, are they looking for certain levels of technology for that transition?
So my view isn't so much that I'm looking for a certain level of technology. Really, we know what we want. So like if the technology isn't there, we'll use it. We'll like implement something. But what we do really care about is processes that like are sustainable. If I'm going to add this extra layer of technology, like is it going to change processes one, or are the processes so strong that I don't have to I could just change things here and there, like finagle like the reporting structure, instead of like before they would tell me before the day what they were going to do. Now I'm just asking at the end of the day what they did do, so I can translate that into into entries. But those things, like in the end, the process is there, right? Like the process of let's have some sort of cadence of you telling me what's going on is really what I cared about, what we were looking for as a sort of buyer.
We were going to need another hour, Chris, because we didn't even talk about processes.
It sounds like we have to do another webinar.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think that's
have to do another webinar.
That's an awesome point, Matthias, that we often come into place companies and IT and finance might be running the software search and they think they know the processes. Then we start going out in the greenhouse or out in the grow and it's not really what anyone thought. And I think getting your processes in line is a very important first step. We don't want to implement software to force a process that isn't right for the organization.
Yeah.
So as a follow-up to all this, are these solutions, so let's just say there are growers who maybe don't have a ton of experience with technology and some of these solutions, are these things easy to learn if you're making that leap?
I think there's definitely a learning curve. Like it is going to take people time to move from like QuickBooks to Business Central, but like again, I think it becomes process oriented as you put the training in there, and like it's my time. Like I know that for this to work, I need to train, and that's like I plan to do that. We did a little bit in November to start getting the system going, and I think we'll do it again in May once we kind of get done with shipping season. I think it's going to be ongoing, but everybody can learn it. It doesn't work any different than QuickBooks. The only differences are just like, can you organize your inventory from the field?
Yeah.
And it does take a little while, but once you everybody can learn, like we teach people, we show them how it works. And then I kind of start offloading things more and more to the rest of our team. So it becomes more and more administrative. I know like people are always afraid of like, oh, when someone gets hit by a bus. Well, that's always how I think about a business. It's like, I want this business to work even if I'm not around. Like I don't want to be this sort of bottleneck that makes things difficult. And if that prices me out of a job, I'm fine with that. Like I think that's the right way to do things, and that's how I'm gonna operate. I think you need to create processes in place for that moment, so that business and everybody that works for you continue to work and not be afraid of their own jobs.
And does Velosio help with that process for you, Sarah? How does Velosio perhaps help with that process, help train people in some way?
Well, we will we will provide implementation services. So we'll provide training, setup support. There's about 1 million questions that can be answered in setup of the software that, to gives the experience the users want. Another great example is it's a role-based interface. So the person in accounts payable is going to see something very different than the person who's in operations. And so that to make it as intuitive as possible for the users. So we do provide those services. And some of our customers want to do a lot more on their own, and others want a lot more assistance. And we can kind of be whatever they want us to be for that implementation process. So we can provide as much or as little. And we typically estimate the project on the assumption that everyone's going to need help. We'd rather give a high estimate and not be over budget. And in this way, everyone's happy when, if Matthias takes on a whole bunch of stuff on his own and, Googles and watches YouTube and then calls us once he gets past that point, that's fine too.
And what we do too is we take the trainer approach. So we get your core group of, we call kind of your power users that are going to be part of the project. And then we train them. And what's great is you can have different companies. So we can have what's called a sandbox. So we have like a sandbox company to where you can go in there and practice and do your thing and hack it to death. You're not in the production system. And so you continue to have that. So we set that up as like a pilot. And so really your data is in there. You have this test environment. Maybe you can say something about that, Matthias.
Yeah, I was going to say, if anybody would look at the sandbox and consider that our actual financial, absolutely no sense. I mean, I spent a lot of time in that just because or spent a lot of time in it because I just wanted to make sure things were going the way I thought it was going to go. And once I kind of learned it, the next stage of my training, I was I've learned a fair amount of it. I know what data I want to store, what I want to save. I kind of you can personalize everything in Business Central. So you can kind of point people in the right direction of what's important. So hide fields that you're not going to use. And as you're sort of learning it, that's, you learn what's important and what's not, and you can hide things. It's so robust that you can do so many different things with it, but it's honing in on the stuff that you really want now. So I want to track when we get sales orders in. So sales order date matters to me. Shipping date matters to me, so I can worry about when the shipping's going to happen. Are we going to get overbooked that week? Are we going to miss promises? Those are just examples of fields that you kind of, as you're doing it, you learn what's important and you can personalize it. With these roles and whatnot, you can almost have control over what everybody else is inputting to some degree. So it's nice from that regard. And the training, and training is training. You have to spend time on it, but I got trained by James for I don't know how many hours, and I'm passing that knowledge on.
We'll end on this. Is there Silverleaf was mentioned? Is there a difference between Silverleaf? What exactly is Silverleaf versus Velosio?
Sure.
You want to take that, Sarah?
Sure. Silverleaf is the horticulture. The word we use is extension to Business Central. So kind of you buy your phone and you get apps from the App Store. We've got Business Central, and then one of the apps you can add to Business Central is Silverleaf, which was written specifically for the horticulture space. And so it's inside Business Central. Users don't really know where Business Central ends and Silverleaf starts, but it extends the functionality. So for example, a a flower grower is going to have need a solution to optimize racking and loads on their trucks, and we add that sort of functionality and other things that are specific to the horticulture space. So it's all from Velosio, and Silverleaf is the industry specific solution.
We actually got one question here from the chat that we'll end on this one properly. So Hannah asked, is there separate support channels for software for Business Central / Microsoft versus any custom software from Velosio? And are there limitations set from Microsoft when maturing any software offerings that are custom made by Velosio?
Velosio would serve as your Microsoft partner for Business Central and Silverleaf if it's a horticulture company, or other vertical solutions that Velosio has developed. So we would be your first frontline support. And if there's an issue that we can't solve, we can use our backdoor to get to Microsoft.
Yeah.
What happens is with Microsoft is, as I mentioned, there's a million different settings for setting up the solution. So they're not going to really know your environment. We're going to know your environment. We've got records on everything, how it's set up, and your processes, and therefore support would be, we would recommend be done through us.
Yeah, and then you only have one place to call or email, right? It's not that you're like, oh wait, this is not Silverleaf, I got to call Microsoft. It's not like that. You really have, it's all us, and we represent you.
Yeah.
We're going to end there. I want to thank Sarah, Todd, and Matthias for being excellent panelists today. Thanks again to Velosio for providing this. I've been Chris Manning for Greenhouse Management. If you are watching this live or only got part of this will be available on our website after the fact. But thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.